ushering in a new century of air power, but keeping it old school, the Super Sabre. Hey, it's Chris from Military Aviation History, and we are at the New England Air Museum visiting once again our friends here in Connecticut and checking out the F-100A Super Sabre, which is basically the first model to come out with that Century series of jets. Now here at the museum as well, big thank you of course to them for providing us this access. But you, in fact, if you visit this museum, can sit inside the Super Sabre. As you can see, the ladder is right there. So just walk up to one of the docents and ask them, hey, can I have a little look inside? And they will certainly gladly oblige. So do check out this museum and the museums in your area. As well as that, big thank you of course to the patrons and channel members who make Inside the Cockpit 100% community funded. Turning around now to the F-100, we are going to be jumping inside, but before that, let's do the walk around. Up front, we have the pitot tube in a stored position, as you can see right here. We don't see that too often. It looks pretty cool. And right there, we also have the nose air intake for the engine. And above that, we have the radar antenna for the radar gun sight. Moving further back now, let's talk about the powerhouse of this aircraft right from the start. We have a J57-7 or -39 axial flow turbojet engine. And it also features afterburning, so you can have this aircraft around about 10,000 pounds of thrust in military, and then once you go into afterburner, you're sitting around 15,000 pounds of thrust there, which is pretty solid for the time. It's a fast aircraft as well, and oh yeah, of course you already see the weaponry right here, but as always we're going to talk about the weaponry on the other side. So let's talk a little bit about the electrical compartment that's here with, of course, the installation or the provisions for that radar antenna with the gun sight in order to facilitate some easier shooting upon your enemies. Moving further towards the cockpit, we have the cockpit pressurized with an ejection seat as well. It is not a 0-0 ejection seat, it is still one of those older ejection seats. And of course you have also anti-G suit provisions in there. Oxygen bottles around the cockpit as well for the pilot. And then as we move further back towards the rear, on the underside we find the speed brake. Before I forget, a retractable landing light is right here. And of course we have the nose wheel with a nose wheel steering. And you can actually see the pulleys here that provide that nose wheel steering of the aircraft. Looking at the back of the aircraft, well, you will find some antennas, but specifically also on the vertical stabilizers you have communication antennas. But just on that dorsal fin behind the cockpit, there's also the ram air turbine that pops out if you need it in order to facilitate some power to the hydraulic system if it fails. Coming then to the low, you could say low swept wing. It sits at, yes, 45 degrees, and it also features these automatic slats right here. Now, in order to then move towards the wingtip, we will have to duck under this F-100A starfighter, doing some yoga here in the morning. It's always good to keep fit. And then as we move towards the wingtip, there's not much to talk about the wing just yet. Notice, of course, the navigational lighting. But then we come to this area right here where you would expect the aileron. And you're looking here, and there's no aileron. Yes, the ailerons are over here. They are two-piece. And then you look at them again, it's like, oh yeah, okay. I found the ailerons now, but where are the trim tabs? No trim. Yes, you can trim the F-100, but once you deflect that hat switch on your stick, what you're deflecting, in fact, or what you're manipulating is the neutral position of that stick. So if you were to trim to the left, the stick neutral position moves, and you have to essentially move the stick with that neutral position to maintain it. And that's how you trim the F-100 Super Sabre. And then as we move around the external fuel bag here, there's one other thing you'll notice, and that is, where are the flaps? No flaps. Yeah, no flaps on this bird. Also no wing tanks. This is still an A model. With the C model, we would get wing tanks. not in the A model that we have right here. But talking about tanks already, we have an inverted saddle layout inside the aircraft, depending on how you want to count them, 3 to 5 fuel tanks. We have a total capacity of roughly 5,000 pounds of fuel. The four-tank, the main tank, where the fuel then also from there is entering the engine, and basically it's 1 or 2 tanks, once again how you want to count them, 2,700 pounds of fuel. Then you have the mid-tanks, again 1 or 2, 1,400 pounds, and then you have an aft tank, which I guess we can consider as our AUX, 800 pounds there. Talking about the engine then, we have an oil tank, of course, 5 gallons, and then let's talk about the hydraulic system. We have 3 hydraulic pumps. One, the first system, is for the utility stuff, so there's gears, there's doors, as well as the speed brake. And then we have 2 hydraulic systems for the flight control system, providing some redundancy in place. Then we have an electric generator, as well as batteries, and 3 inverters to provide DC to AC power for the different systems that are in place. The weight of the aircraft goes from 18,000 pounds empty to 29,000 pounds for max takeoff, but tactical weight, or rather combat weight, really would be around about 25,000 pounds. Now, moving to the tail then, we have an all-moving horizontal stabilizer right here. Sits quite in a low position. Below the aircraft, we also have an arrestor hook, and then we have the drag chute, and then look at the vertical stabilizer with a splitter type rudder to reduce sort of the fluttering effect on the control surface, and then on the top we have the VHF antennas for radio communication. And then we come to this. Now, in any sort of jet that you know nowadays, you're going to be saying, oh, this is a variable nozzle, right? Variable exhaust nozzle, and be done with it. Well, that's not true in the F-100 here that we have. This is a 2-position exhaust nozzle. It just has basically open and closed for afterburning, which is pretty cool. It's nice. I like it. We went to variable exhaust nozzles in the years following that, but that's how essentially it started. Then, looping around, let's have another look over the aircraft itself, as well as the most confusing spelling of Connecticut that I've ever seen. And then we move towards the wing tip. We have, of course, navigational lighting. Moving then towards the wing itself, let's talk about the weapon systems that could be carried on the F-100. I'll talk about the guns soon, but as we're on the wing, well, you can already see we have like a drop tank right there, roughly, I believe, 250 gallons this one is. What you would also have is either air-to-air missiles with IR homing missiles, so AIM-9Bs back then, the good old OG Sidewinders. Or you could in fact have the AGM-12 bulb-ups already, so that's an air-to-ground missile with MCLOS, so manual command line of sight guidance, where the pilot fires the missile and then has to guide it himself manually into the target, but without actually having the aid of any sort of targeting pod. He really just has to follow the missile as it's trailing towards the target, and he can make minute adjustments with his controller on its path. And in order for that to be fired, there would also have to be an antenna up front, of course, for this system, which is, I believe, not installed on this aircraft. But now let's move past the J57 engine that's actually installed in the aircraft. Nice little cutaway there. And then talk about the guns. We have the M39 20mm cannons here. We have 4 inside the aircraft. It's a 5-barrel rotary cannon. Okay, so that's obviously nonsense. It's not a 5-barrel rotary cannon. It is a single-barrel 5-chamber revolver cannon. I can only assume that because we filmed the F-104 before that with the M61 Gatling gun, that somewhere in my mind things got twisted. Anyway, back to the video. And it fires a 20 by 102mm round, 1,500 rounds a minute, and each gun in the ammo box provided here has 200 rounds, giving some heavy firepower. 4 guns is not bad at all, and with this sort of provision system you can change the ammo boxes relatively quickly on the aircraft and then restock the aircraft on the ground. Now, with that being said and done, what do you say? Let's jump inside the aircraft and check her out? Yes, absolutely. And obviously, remember, visit museums because this is what keeps them alive, and you can always have a chance of getting in one of these aircrafts yourself. So follow me. Let's jump into the Super Sabre then. This cockpit screams Century series, and you will certainly find parallels to other aircraft of that era. As always, we move left to right. The left starts out pretty easy. Next to the pilot we find lots of circuit breakers and then the emergency air brake lever. As we move forward, we find the site selector unit, as well as a UHF control panel and the armaments panel for the site. Further forward, the engine master switches and emergency air start switch. And then outboard of the throttle, we find the drag chute release. Then we come to the throttle itself. You know this one from previous US or NATO aircraft. In the early Super Sabre, we move it into mil power and then knock it to the side for afterburner. The stick features a speed brake switch, the side caging button, and a push to transmit button. If you twist your stick, you adjust the manual ranging to the target on the side. Forward of the throttle, environmental controls and some limited trim control. Straight ahead, on the left forward panel, we find the landing gear indicators, as well as the gear lever itself, and on the top right, the landing and taxi light switch. Staying on the left but looking up, the release for the tailhook. It's a conventional mechanical release, so it can't be retracted. This is just for emergency, and the Super Sabre wasn't operating on carriers, but it could use the tailhook also on conventional airfields in emergencies. Below that, the UHF channel indicator. Moving forward, we are greeted by a very Century series looking cockpit. If you compare this to some other planes featured in the series, like the F-100A, you will see some differences. This early Super Sabre's cockpit probably isn't as good as we see on, for example, later starfighters. In the first column, we have the speedometer with an integrated Mach counter. Below that, the altimeter and a radio compass. And on the top, an accelerometer and a clock. A big gyromagnetic compass takes up most of the space in the middle, while a turn and slip indicator as well as a rate of climb meter sit below that. To the right, squarely in the center, an artificial horizon. Moving to the right towards the engine controls, first up we have the hydraulic pressure indicators. Below that, the exhaust temperature gauge and an engine turbine RPM gauge. All the way on the bottom, a fuel flow and fuel quantity indicator side by side. And then to the far right, the oil pressure and engine pressure, above the cabin altitude for pressurization. Looking up now, the gun sight and whiskey compass. If we look all the way down, we find an emergency landing gear release handle, and the other red handle behind the stick is for the emergency drop of external stores. Moving to the forward right panel, electric generator switches and the engine ignition starter switches. Further along the right, the oxygen regulator and the radio compass control panel. Towards the rear, the IFF and selective identification panel, as well as a large lightings control panel on the outboard station. And then we move further back yet, past a whole lot of circuit breakers. There is a map case and an emergency hand pump for the hydraulic flight control system. It's not exactly conveniently placed, but better there than nowhere. And then we come to the controls. Rudders are of course used for yaw control, and then we have the stick for roll and pitch. This stick is basically the same that you see in the majority of late 1950s to 1970s, even 1980s US aircraft. The hat switch is for your roll and pitch trim control, and then the offset switch is to drop your ordnance, while the trigger in the back fires guns and missiles. The radar reject button is on the side. This does exactly what it says. It rejects the radar lock and frees the radar to search and then track another target. And then we have the nose wheel steering that is set to the pinky switch. And that was it, the Super Sabre. This brings us to the end of today's episode. I hope that all of you enjoyed it, and let me know in the comments below what you thought about this bird. Big thank you here also to the New England Air Museum for facilitating this shoot and for the fantastic support on the ground. Make sure you visit museums like the New England Air Museum, and if you do come here, let them know we say hi. Big thank you to patrons and channel members for making Inside the Cockpit 100% community funded. And as always, have a great day and see you in the sky. Ooh. Afterburner. Cool.